Today, we want to talk about Queen Esther. This story is found in the book of Esther, God's providence. In Esther chapter 4, verse 13 and 14, this statement is made. And Mordecai told them to answer Esther, "Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another plague. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Now, this has to do with the story of his niece, Queen Esther. Now, this is an interesting book. In the book of Esther, God's name is never mentioned. One of the only books where his name is never mentioned. But his fingerprints all over this book. And we will see that as we deal with looking at the events that put Esther in a position to save God's people from being exterminated. Who knows that you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Maybe she's where she's at the time she's at, and in the position she's at, for something that she can only do. Let's see if that comes to be true. King Artaxerxes is the reigning king of Persia from 486 to 465 BC. He ruled over 127 different provinces in the kingdom of Persia. He warred unsuccessfully against Greece, and Greece would end up being his downfall. The Jews were scattered as a result of the Babylonian captivity. They were scattered, and they were in different locations. Now, in 483 BC, the king gave a royal feast in Shushan. That's the political capital, and he gives a very elaborate and long-lasting feast. It lasted for 180 days. That's 6 months, at least 6 months. This 6 month feast is for all the officers and people of higher positions, and it's a very royal feast that has a lot of drinking, a lot of carousing, a lot of things that are immoral and wrong, but it's something that those people who live without God, things that they do. Queen Vashti entertained the women while the king entertained the men. And this went on, like I said, for a period of time. After becoming married with wine, which is just a way of saying in a politically correct way, I guess, is that he was drunk, the king sought to parade Vashti's beauty before these drunken men and their guests to show what a beautiful woman she was. And if you do a little research, he didn't just want her to come in and show about how beautiful she was. He wanted her to come in naked so all the people could look at what a beautiful woman she was. Well, Queen Vashti refused. In Esther chapter 1, in verse 12, and Queen Vashti refused to come to the king's command brought by his eunuchs. Therefore the king was furious, and his anger burned within him. In verse 19 it says, "If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more before the king Artaxerxes, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she." And so the people who were consulting and counselors of the king said, if this gets out, that the queen refused to submit to your will and to your orders, then it will cause the other women of the kingdom to also refuse to submit to the orders and dictates of their husbands. And so they determined to tell the king, well, just get rid of Vashti, kind of put her in isolation, remove her, and pick another queen from among the women in the palace and make her queen instead of Vashti. And so there's going to be a new queen. Now again, after the drunkenness wears off, and after he realizes what he did, he begins to regret that he removed the queen. But now he's already made this proclamation, and so a proclamation goes throughout the whole kingdom, that all the virgins are going to be brought to the palace, and they're going to go through a process, and then they're going to appear before the king, and he's going to choose one to be the queen. This process takes 4 years. Esther was chosen, but she had not yet revealed her Jewish heritage. Mordecai, her uncle, told her, don't tell anybody what your background is. And so she did not tell anybody that she was Jewish. Each woman spent a year in preparing. They would spend a year in preparing their skin and their makeup and their flesh, and they would begin all the beauty treatments and all the luxurious things that could be afforded by the king in order to prepare them to stand before the king. And then each one spent a night with the king. Each one took their turn and spent a night with the king, and then they were sent out the next morning. And those not chosen were placed with the king's concubine. If one came in and spent a night with him, and then he did not find favor with her, then she was put in kind of like a separate place where she became one of his concubines, and she was in a secluded place. Now, Mordecai is the uncle of Esther, and he's going to become a major player. He served as the king's gatekeeper in Esther chapter 2, verse 5 through 7. Verse 5 says, in Shushan, in the citadel, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives, who had been captured with Jehoiakim, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful. When her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. And so he raised her as his daughter because her parents were no longer living. Now, when this gatekeeper, when Haman would come in to go to the palace, he was the one who was very high up and prominent in the king's entourage, and he was a very powerful man, and all the people used to bow down and pay him homage, but not Mordecai. Mordecai was a Jew, faithful to God. He paid homage to no man. And so he refused to bow and to pay homage to Haman. That angered Haman, and he became very angry and troubled at Mordecai. He revealed to Queen Esther the plot to assassinate the king. Now later on, even though Haman hates him, in verse 19, when the virgins gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat within the king's gate. Now Esther had not revealed her family and her people just as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai as she was brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Tresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai. He told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed that both were hanged on the gallows, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. And so, during the passage of time, Esther finds favor with the king, and she is chosen as queen. While she is queen, Mordecai finds out about this plot. The the king's servants were planning to kill him, and she reveals it to Mordecai. Mordecai reveals it to Esther, and Esther tells the king. The king finds out, brings the men in, investigates it, finds out it's true, and then hangs him on the gallows. And he writes all this down in the King's Chronicles. In the King's Chronicles, he writes down what Mordecai had done and that his life had been spared. Now, Haman is the king's prime minister, and he's arrogant, he's pompous, and he's full of himself. And after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Amminadab, the Agagite, and advanced him to set him above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not pay homage. He would not bow down to Haman. Everybody else, he's second in command, he's the prime minister, and all of them paid homage, but not Mordecai, because he was faithful to God. He devised a plot, so he's angry, and he's moping around, and he's upset. And so he devises a plot, not just to kill Mordecai, but to kill all the Jews. He doesn't just want to get rid of Mordecai, he wants to get rid of the whole Jewish race. And so he devises a plot. And he got the king's consent to the plot in Esther chapter 3, beginning in verse 10. So the king took the signet ring from his hand, gave it to Haman, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money and the people are given to you to do with them as you see good. Then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors, and over each province of the official of all his people, to every province according to his script, and every people in their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus, it was written and sealed with the king's signet ring. And the letters were sent by courier to the king's province to destroy, to kill, to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little, children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the document was to be issued as law in every province. Remember, there were 127, and published for all the people that they should be ready for that day. The couriers went out and hastened by the king's command in Shushan, the citadel. So the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. And so he makes this proclamation that on this 12th day of the month of Adar, that all the Jews that are in the provinces of these 127 provinces are to be put to death, and all of their assets are to be taken and given into the king's treasury. And so it becomes a law. And so all the Jews are put on notice that on a given day that the king, by the order of Haman, is going to wipe out that race. Now, step one is Esther's the queen. She's a Jew. And so that puts her at verse 2. Mordecai insists that she go before the king to intercede for the Jews, to stop Haman. So this can't take place. So the Jews won't be exterminated. And Esther explains to Mordecai, unless the king calls me to come before him, which he hasn't for a few days, and if I go to him without being called to come in his presence, I can be put to death. So she says, I can't do anything. And that's why we read what we read in the beginning. Mordecai says, now if you're going to remain silent and you think you're going to protect yourself, then your heritage is going to be known, and you're going to be in the firing line just like us. But if you refuse to do anything and you don't do anything, then you are going to die with us. But the Jews will not be exterminated, because God will send help from another way, and we will be spared. But notice in Esther chapter 4, and remember what he said, who knows that you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And so Esther chooses to do what? Verse 15. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan, fast from me, neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do likewise. And I will go to the king, which is against the law, and so if I perish, I perish. And Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther commanded him. And so Esther chooses to risk her life. I'm going to go before the king, and if I lose my life, I lose my life. But I'm going to go, and I'm going to try to save my people. She shows she has noble character, and she has strength, and she has courage. She then invites the king and Haman to a special banquet. In Esther 5 verse 4, this is Esther's plan. She has a banquet, and she asked the king if she could have a banquet, and she could invite him and Haman. And so they come to the banquet in Esther 5, in verse number 4. So Esther answered, if it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today for a banquet that I have prepared for him. He was willing to give her half the kingdom, and all she wanted was to have a banquet for him and for Haman. Step 2. Haman encounters Mordecai the night before the first banquet. Before the first banquet, he encounters Mordecai. That greatly angers him, and he's upset. And so he's upset, and look at the advice that he got in verse 9. So Haman went out that day joyful with a glad heart, but when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and he did not stand or tremble before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and called for his friend and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman told them of his great riches, the multitude of his children, everything which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced in him above the officials and servants of the king. Moreover, Haman said, besides all this, Queen Esther invited no one but me to come in with the king to a large banquet that she prepared, and tomorrow I am again invited by her along with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing, as I look and see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh says, and all of his friends, let a gallows be made, 50 cubits high, and in the morning suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it, then go merrily with the king to the banquet, and the thing pleased Haman, so he had the gallows built. And so he built the gallows. The plan is, the next morning he's going to go to the king in that banquet, and he's going to ask that he be able to take Mordecai's life. Well, that night, the king can't sleep. Chapter 6. That night the king could not sleep. No one was commanded to bring, so one was commanded to bring the book of the records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs and doorkeepers who had sought to lay hands on the king. And the king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for what he did? And the king's servant who attended him said, nothing's been done for him. He just said what he did, but no, there was no reward, there was nothing done. So the king said, who's in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest that the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. The king's servant said to him, Haman is there, standing in the court, and the king says, let him come in. Now, so the king can't sleep. He asked for the Chronicles, and now it's come to the king's attention that Mordecai saved his life, and yet no reward or nothing of benefit was done for Mordecai, and he wonders now what he can do to show gratitude to Mordecai. And so the king asked Haman a question. So Haman came in, the king asked him, what shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, who would the king delight to honor more than me? And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, which has a royal crest placed upon his head. And then let this robe and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor, then parade him on horseback throughout the city square, and proclaim before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robe and the horse, and do all that you have suggested, and do so for Mordecai the Jew, who sits within the king's gate. Leave nothing undone to which you have spoken. And now Haman is forced to honor Mordecai. He has to lead him all around the city square, riding on the king's horse with the king's seal, with their robe, and hail Mordecai in the name of the king. Remember, he had come in to ask for Haman. Haman had come in to ask the king to have Mordecai hung on the gallows. But now he's sent out to bless Mordecai instead of hanging him. And this, he does all that, and Haman's wife, when he comes home, he's miserable. He's miserable. The gallows that he built stand there empty, and he had to bless the man that he's angry with. Listen to the words of his wife in verse 13. When Haman told his wife Zerah and all friends everything that happened to him that day, his wise men and his wife Zerah said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs came and hastened to bring Haman to the banquet that Esther had prepared. Now, this is the second banquet, and now this is step 3. The second banquet. There is Haman along with the king. Now, in chapter 7, she reveals to the king her request. Verse 3, then Queen Esther answered and said, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, to be eliminated. Had we been sold as a male and female slave, I would have held my tongue, although the enemy could never compensate for the king's loss. So King Ahasuerus answered and said to Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he? Who would dare presume in his heart to do such an evil thing? And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is the wicked Haman. So Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. You see, the king granted Esther whatever she requested, up to half his kingdom. She requested her life and the life of her people. The king says, who would do such a thing? Who would raise his hand against the queen and against her people? And she fingers Haman. And Haman is now terrified, standing before Esther. Now, it says in verse 7, the king arose in wrath from the banquet of the wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stood before Queen Esther, pleading for his life, for he saw the king was determined against him by the king. Evil was determined to him by the king. When the king returned from the palace garden to the place of the banquet of wine, Haman had fallen across the couch where Esther was. Then the king said, will he also assault the queen while I am in the house? And as the word left the king's mouth, it covered Haman's face. Now Harbonah, one of the eunuchs, said to the king, look, the gallows 50 cubits high, which he, Haman, had made for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf, is standing in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath subsided. And so the gallows that he built for Mordecai, he was hung on them himself. Now, step 4, Mordecai is given Haman's position. Now he is second in command in Persia. What about the decree? What are they going to do about the decree on this day that the Jews are going to be driven out and they're going to be made extinct? What about that? The king issues a new decree in Esther 8, in 8 through 10, and the Jews receive permission to defend themselves against any attack. And that is a decree of the king. So, the nation is preserved. The Jews are not eliminated, they're not exterminated, and their nation continues. And it's because of the faithfulness and the courage of Queen Esther. Now, do we see God's hand in this? An orphan is taken in by her cousin. Just seems to be a random thing. His brother is killed and his wife, but they have a daughter, so he takes in his cousin and he's going to raise her. After she'd gone to another relative's, what if she'd gone to another relative's home? Then she wouldn't have been in that position. She wouldn't have been with Mordecai. Revealed her identity to the king when Mordecai instructed her not to. What if she disobeyed Mordecai and would have told the king that she was a Jew? Well, he might not have chosen. The decree sent out because the king held out the royal scepter. What if he hadn't held it out? What if he hadn't held it out to Esther? She would have been put to death. But he holds out the royal scepter, and then she could come in his presence. Mordecai, a man of wisdom and intelligence. Was Mordecai yet alive to be appointed prime minister? What if Haman would have taken it upon himself to kill him, and he wouldn't have been in the position where he was in order to be promoted? What if the king had not been restless that night and had the chronicles read to him? How did it happen that Mordecai's good deed had been overlooked? How did that happen? Why didn't they reward him at the time it happened? And how did a young Jewish orphan become queen over a world empire? It was because of the modesty of Queen Vashti, who would not give in to her husband. Now, God's name is never mentioned in this story, not one time. Yet, all of the things that take place one step at a time leads to the saving of the people of God, because Queen Esther is in the right place at the right time. And she's there because she's a woman of character, of courage, and commitment and loyalty to her upbringing father, Mordecai. And Mordecai, because of his faithfulness to God, is in a position where he ends up being elevated to the position that Haman had in order to send out a counter decree that will protect and keep God's people from being eliminated. You see, God didn't intervene in any direct way. He didn't do a miracle. He didn't do any of that. He just allowed the people to make the decisions, and he had them in the places where they needed to be in order to make sure that the race would stay intact so he could bring his son into the world. You see, that's providence. That's how it works. It works by man making his free will choice, and then God working his plan through that free will choice. No divine intervention, no twisting things, just putting the right people in the right place and have the right outcome. That's how providence works.